Hello again, and welcome back to Fireside Adoptees and Constellation. And we're bringing you an event here with a domestic adoptee, Ken DeStefano, born in the late 1960s and raised in a very caring and loving home. And Ken has described himself as an adoptee who had a largely happy life and always wondered about the unknown. And his curiosity led to a search for his own birth mother and a reunification with her. And Ken had a debut novel titled I Will See You Again, Hearts Will Sing. And it tells the story of two people whose past, present, and future lives are inexplicably linked. So Ken, welcome to Fireside. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. So thankful for being given the opportunity to join you and talk to the rest of the community.
So Ken, I appreciate the fact that I got to know you a little bit in New York. We had the good fortune of being introduced by our friend Emma Stevens and had a nice conversation. I know a little bit about your profession, et cetera, but you were coming on the scene as somebody who was a writer, and we're starting to emerge more into the adoptive community. So I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about your personal adoption story. In other words, more about the situation, if you know about your relinquishment and when you were adopted.
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to. I was born in 1969. I didn't know very much, like many of us, for most of my life. I was adopted almost immediately within the first couple of weeks of when I was born, to a family, mom, dad, great mom and dad, two older siblings that were biological. I came around about 4 years later. And then I had another brother who came around about 11 years later, also adopted. Great situation. Great, big Italian family, Irish family, all, very quiet. Everybody was very quiet. That's just kidding. Now Italians are loud. So a lot of love, a lot of fun, a lot of good things. Um, it was really a good experience. But as I kind of hint at in the book and some of the things maybe some of the other people feel with, there's always a sense that, something was a little bit off, something was a little bit different. I think I hear stories that when I was little, I used to, make up stories about my birth mother and, try and fill in gaps and, went through life growing up pretty much, doing pretty well. Greg, are you still there? I had a problem
Yeah,
with the iPad.
that's okay. It was only a couple seconds. Yeah, please continue.
So largely successful life, high school, college, like most, I ended up in law school, but like most people who ended up in law school, I spent about 3 years bartending in between because I didn't know what to do with my life and then realized you can't do that forever. And married, two kids, 24 and 20 now, been married 27, 28 years. And it's just that's the big picture, but I'm sure we'll get into some other things. And lately, the itch just got stronger and stronger. And I decided to start unraveling the mystery a little bit.
I'm really struck by how similar our stories are. So I'm also a 1969 adoptee. Um, do have two older siblings who are biologically my parents. My children are, I think, the same ages as yours. My son is 25, my daughter is 20, so very close in age. Also had what I would call a pretty happy childhood overall. I didn't know anything about my adoption. I knew at age 10 I found out about it, but I feel like there were questions that were left unanswered, still have not been answered for me, but sounds very similar in a lot of ways. And the unpacking part, the becoming aware of things. So I want to know if we could talk a little bit about that. So growing up, when did you find out you were adopted, actually? Was it something you always knew?
There's never a time I didn't know, as far as I know. Like as far as I can remember, it was always a thing that we talked about. It was not hidden. It was celebrated as a special thing. It Clearly it was a unique situation in the family, um, but it was something I always knew about. I am biologically Italian and Irish, and I was adopted by a family that's Italian and Irish. So I sort of kind of resembled a lot of the people, that was around. So, but I did always know.
And how would you describe growing up in terms of school life, et cetera? Were you aware of the fact of being an adoptee still fit in well with other people, or did you have any particular friends maybe that were adopted?
I had a really good friend when I was young who was adopted, who actually read the book and enjoyed it. We had a couple good laughs about it. And I managed to have good friends a lot of my life, but it does impact your relationships, and this might be something we talk about. You develop a way of relating. I developed a way of relating to people that I now look back and realize probably had something to do with being adopted. And if you want to ask a question, or you want me to just keep going?
Oh no, that's very astute. I would like to know if you could comment on that a little bit more, because I found it impacted, of course, my relationships too. But are there any instances you'd like to talk about in particular about that?
Yeah, it's just it's being a pleaser. It's seeing what people want. I know Anne Heffron talks about the chameleon metaphor. That adoptees can be chameleons. Before I heard that, I always thought of it as a mirror. That I would be very good at seeing what people wanted from me and becoming what they wanted to be accepted. And because of that, people tend to like me. I tend, which on some level that's wonderful. But as maybe we get a little older, did they like me, or did they like the me that I was presenting myself to be? There was also always extreme insecurity about rejection.
Oh yeah.
For some of our younger people, there used to be a time where people would like take this thing off the wall and dial numbers and talk to people. It was called the telephone, and that's how people used to communicate. But if like I called somebody and they didn't call back, it was very, I don't want to say traumatic, but it was very upsetting. Oh my God, they didn't call back. They didn't call back. And a lot of that I kind of look back now on was probably part of what I was dealing with.
Yeah, I think that there's an awareness that grows. Maybe we can talk about that a little later, about how you came into that awareness that maybe things were connected to being an adoptee after all. But I think we sail through, at least a lot of us did, particularly in the baby scoop era, because our parents were a certain way, I think, and they didn't talk to us so much about it, if at all, at least mine. And I think we were surprised later on in life to find out, oh wow, this happened to me. Not just I knew that happened, but I now feel what this did to me. And maybe there was an experience like that for you too that we could explore later. I'd love to talk about that. Did you feel that as you grew up, that you were starting to think more about, or had you always? I know you said they told you made up stories about your family, biological family. So I assume that in the context of your family, people were comfortable with you talking about the existence of your biological family?
Yeah. Not so much about the biological component of it. It really didn't come up much, but more about the fact that I was adopted. And the story, which I told, I'm too young to remember it, was that I used to tell people that my birth mother was a crossing guard, and she had to give me up so that she could help the kids get to and from school every day. And that's why I was given up for adoption.
That was why. Huh? So you had like a purpose. You thought that she had to do that for some other purpose.
Yeah, and I think what it is, and maybe it's something other people have dealt with. There's just a little mystery that doesn't make sense, maybe for us adoptees, and it's pre-logical, maybe. It happens from like the earliest point. So you're trying to figure out this puzzle. For me, I think we're trying to figure out something that just seems a little different, a little off.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. And so you spend a lot of time thinking about it, but not thinking about it. And I think it's just part of the evolution of what I did, was always trying to come up with the reason why.
I really like this pre-logical. I wrote that down, but I think that's something worth pondering. We talk a lot about pre-verbal, for example.
Yeah.
Pre-logical too. It's almost like something that not only we didn't have words for, but it even precludes a certain rationality that didn't didn't have a way to make sense of, so we created some kind of reality to fill that in, whether it really would make a lot of sense to somebody or not. Is that really what you're saying?
And Greg, I'll tell you, one thing I actually have come to think about, and I'm a swimmer and I spend a lot of time alone, so my mind runs with things. Is I wonder if, I know myself, I wonder if other adoptees, do we become good at unraveling puzzles because we've been doing it our whole lives? I've spoken to a lot of people in the community, and a lot of them seem to be very, very intelligent people, very hyper aware of what's going on around them. And I just find it curious. And in the metaphor, the example, I'm sorry, my English teacher would tell me I'm probably using the wrong one. I don't remember. But I think about if you took a baby and you gave them 5-pound dumbbells and they did curls every day for their life, then they would have incredibly strong arms, right? They would be far advanced. Well, in some way, that's almost what our minds were doing from the earliest days. We were trying to figuring out a mystery, put a puzzle together that other people didn't have to put together.
Yeah.
So our brains were like looking for solutions and things, I think, at the earliest levels. And I wonder if that kind of follows through life.
Yeah. In my case, it was Rubik's Cube. That was the puzzle for me. Very interesting. Yeah, I really like the articulation of that. So I think you're right. I think we do come in with this special vigilance, obviously, which is not always a great thing because it can mean that the heightenedness in our nervous systems. But being people seeking understanding or to assimilate a narrative or a story for ourselves that makes sense. So I think there's a lot of merit to what you just said, and I really appreciate the way you expressed that. Do you relate at all to the concept of the adoptee fog? Is that something that you think about or have familiarity with?
Yeah, the adoptee fog, where you're kind of going through your life not really understanding what this meant for you as a person.
Yeah.
I think that I do relate to that. As I said, I think there was always these gnaws, these itchings, but you never really knew how it impacted your life. And for me, I'm 54 years old. Like I said, I have a wife, my kids are older. Part of the coming out of the fog was a practical thing in that my kids were older. I was no longer terrified about the mortgage, the rent, driving them to soccer practice, doing their homework. So I actually had started having time to slow down and think. And as I had that a little more time, some of the itching became a little stronger. And Greg, I'll tell you, in talking to other people, it seems like people around my age seem to be coming to this about at the same time. And I do wonder if that's just because life just hits a different point there.
That's what I was
The
going
only
to. Yeah.
the only thing I would say for me is, in terms of coming out of the fog, it's almost like coming out of the fog and going into another fog. I'm not really
Mhm.
sure. I'm not. I think there's many more laps around the track to do.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. So I feel like I was on the other side of the fog, meaning I wasn't going back into it, but it didn't mean there wasn't more of it in some forms ahead of me.
Yeah.
And that I can be thrown for a loop out of nowhere sometimes, in the most unexpected ways. I think I've thought most of this through by now, and suddenly something that's really obvious to a person who's not adopted suddenly hit me in the face. And I'll go, I never thought about that. I thought I was farther
And,
along than I was.
and isn't it interesting that sometimes it's just the strangest things that put you in weird places. And you're like, why is this putting me here? And one of the things, your mind does go in certain places. And I know there's a lot of talk in the community about healing, about dealing with things. And I don't know where I am on all that. But what I'm kind of noticing is that I notice I've always been away. A lot of it had to do with adoptees. If something happens, I start seeing the negative. Somebody doesn't get back to me. So, it's almost like, to me, it's more, the challenge to me is to not let my brain take me to a place that's negative, that's not real, because that happened too much in the past. Like I was saying, a friend didn't call me back. Oh my God, they must hate me. Maybe they don't want to talk to me. no, maybe they just were out driving around and getting, McDonald's. It's like at this point in maybe it's not quite coming out of the fog, but it's the starting of the process of no. When you see your mind going there, stop having it go there. And it's that famous thing. It's simple, but not easy. It's simple to understand, but it's very not easy to do.
Yeah, that's really good too. Did you find that there were certain, I know that we've said there was a level of domestic stability that had to be there, and things had to be off your mind, and suddenly maybe things got more expansive inwardly, like I hadn't thought about this, or now I have room to think about this. Were there any particular events that maybe precipitated you thinking through about your own adoption?
I'd been in the same job for a while. I'd had a couple of people that were friends, that I wouldn't say we ever like broke up at all, but I just started realizing that the friendships were one way. I started realizing I was always the one calling. I was always one texting. And it's one thing to not be insecure about doing that. It's another thing to realize, oh no, this is a one-sided relationship. And that is the type of relationship I shouldn't be in. So as I started noticing that, and I mentioned work, I started noticing at work that, it just, I was putting in more than I was getting out, and started saying, like, why am I not valuing myself?
I think that's a full level of awareness that can come to you at different points in your life, and an appraisal of your own worth, right? That, because I would be the same way. I had to chase relationships with some people and conversations, and I still do that to an extent, to a large extent with my family. I do that. And it gives me anxiety to wait to see if they're going to contact me. And I don't think they will, and they don't. And then I reach out and I feel like I sustain all these things from both sides of relationships. And it is very easy to throw my self-worth into that, because I feel like maybe I'm not worth reaching out to. And I have people, including people on the call here, who have to reassure me sometimes. And I think adoptees do that for each other, because it doesn't just go away, does it?
Greg, I'm going to circle back to, I think, how we started. We're talking about when we first met.
Yeah.
That was at an event.
Yep.
And I don't know, I'm not going to ask you, I don't know your impression of me or anything that night. And I don't want to ask you, I don't even want you to react, just play poker. I went home and I told my wife, I was supposed to go to another event the Saturday, next day at the Saturday. I went home and told my wife, I can't go back Saturday.
Oh.
I can't. This was just too emotional. It was too overwhelming.
Yeah.
I was such a nervous, horrific bundle of nerves that I just feel like I was being, on the rack. And I've spoken to other people that were there, and they told me that I looked calm and fine.
Yeah, you did.
But internally, it was so exhausting, because it was the first time I was really around a group of adoptee people. And somebody made the comment that it was odd, because I'm so used to trying to figure out what people are wanting from me, like in big groups. But it was all just people that weren't doing that. So it was almost disorienting. It was a very odd experience. It was wonderful, wonderful. But it was unique. It was like the first time I experienced something like that, and it completely drained me.
I hear that from a lot of people, and I've experienced it as well when I first went into a larger space like that. And I knew a lot of the names of the people and the faces of the people. I had conversations with people, not in real life, and then meeting them finally, and it was a huge surge of everything. It was overwhelming. You did come back though, right? So I think I remember seeing you the next night.
Yeah, I came back Saturday and Sunday. I went to a writing show.
Yeah.
Sunday and
So
Saturday was great. Saturday was when they showed the
yeah.
film and we had the post event.
I'm glad you did. And I'm glad we got the chance to connect. Obviously, we wouldn't be speaking here if we hadn't had that connection there. And it leads me to ask you about the emergence into the adoptee community specifically. That's a big deal for a lot of people. And there are people who that I know will say, if I do go to an event, will you introduce me to people? It's scary. It's really scary to go into those spaces. So how is it for you, for instance, to start going into a space like this or into other interviews and really be talking to adoptees? Is that something that creates a lot of exhilaration or anxiety, or what's that experience like for you?
It does, but actually, it creates anxiety, but I enjoy doing it. I feel like I know I'm talking a lot, but I so much like to hear what people are saying. It's just so interesting to me, and it's nice to be part of a community. Um, I'll sidetrack a little bit. I was at the Tucson Festival of Books about a month ago.
Yeah.
Diane Schiffler put together an adoptee author section. And we were sitting at the adoptee table, a bunch of us. It was all good. And a mom came over, and she was an adopted mom, and she had a 12-year-old girl who was adopted. And we chatted. They bought a book. They walked away. Then, like 2 minutes later, the mom walks back to us. And she says, I just want you to know that my daughter just said, finally, there's a group of people for me. And it just felt so special, and that was her experience. I'm using that as an example, but that's the way it is being around adoptees. They're special people.
And you never know who you might be a catalyst for either. I find
Yeah.
a lot, just like you said here. And it is overwhelming to hear that and to have people to say things like that to you. Yeah, I can imagine what that felt like.
Yeah.
And then as the connections grow and the comfort in the community kind of settles in, you become a sounding board for other people. People come here, they're commenting in the chat, and they're like, oh, wow. Our words, our stories.
Yep.
We bring as many of them to a larger group as we can, because I feel like it's always edifying for people. It is for me. I learn something from every person I talk to in this context. And I've written down these wonderful things that you said, like the pre-logical thing. That was a big thing for me. I wonder if you could talk for a second, because I don't talk to as many male adoptees as I wish I did. Do you have any thoughts on why there are not as many male adoptee voices out there? So I know there's a lot of male adoptees, but maybe we don't come forward as often.
I don't know. I guess it's probably that, that I think there's a couple things. I've never really thought about it that one way. Men are probably a little less likely to share vulnerability.
Yes.
I'm not like that because, you've met me. I have the strength of 10 men and the attitude of an ancient Spartan warrior. So I have no fears about that. That's a joke, please. That's a joke. I think people are afraid of that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think also, the adoption experience, I don't want to get into people with, their birth father and everything. The adoption experience, to me, there's three key people. There's the adopted child, the birth mother, and the adopted mother. Really are a special triumvirate of people in this setting.
Yeah.
And relationships between men and their moms are unique, and it's very different. I have a son and a daughter. It's very different, the relationship between a boy and his mother. And I think there might be a reluctance of male adoptees to kind of start peeling that orange a little bit out of a feeling of what would be the word? I don't know, like betrayal almost.
I know what word I want to use for it, because I have exactly the same view that you do of this. There's, for me, an obligation. There's or a great reluctance or resistance to doing it. And I see it in male adoptees. I also hear it when there's, say, a woman who was adopted and the brother who was adopted, and that, say, the female comes out of the fog and the male persists. and stays beholden to a large degree to the adoptive mother. I think it's all over the place. I hear it so many times. I think you just hit on it really expressively. It does make it hard to talk, and the betrayal sense. Once the words emerge from you, you feel like, what have I done? What did I maybe ruin?
Yeah. And this is someone who has done amazing things for me and loved me, and I don't want to hurt them.
Yes.
I don't want to, like, even to pivot to my book, like, it's a novel, it's not a memoir. And the reason I wrote it like that is I wanted to give the reader the opportunity to see relationships in a safer way, where they can feel that they're not judging, or they're not being judged, or nobody's being judged, and to explore some of the feelings of really the three, key parties. Because, I mean, listen, every situation is not perfect, but there's many situations where all three people are very good people trying to do their best in a difficult world. And you just got to love people who want to do that. And just, it's good if we can help people see each other from different perspectives.
I'm glad you addressed it. That actually had been a question I had of why the novel had been the canvas you had chosen rather than a memoir, because we hear so many people rightly who've done adoptee memoirs, but I haven't read the book, so I can't pretend to know the content of it. But it sounds like you were able to use that as a vehicle for expressing what you're going through or feeling as an adoptee.
Yeah, and it was a nice thing. First, you want it to be interesting. So maybe it's, I don't consider myself a terribly interesting person.
I don't know.
So I thought maybe if I could jazz it up with a little bit of fiction, maybe people would be more willing to turn the page. I have some great real life stories about fifth grade spelling bees, but I'm not sure they're going to be getting anybody to turn the page. But I thought I'd make it more interesting. But then also it's everybody, we watch movies, we read books, you see heroes, you say, I want to be like that hero. If I was in that situation, that's how I would react. So in the book, I kind of created these same situations for the reader to almost say, oh, right, that's how they reacted. I like the way they reacted in the book. That's maybe the way I would react. Maybe that's a good way to react. So, I got stuck in a book about a third of the way through in writing it. And I wrote it very, very quickly, but I got stuck. So if anybody's interested, towards the end, I wrote something which is like the last page now. It's the author's note, which talks about why I wrote the book. And one of the things I put in there, it's very important. Like, to all other adoptees, I want to hear your stories, because this is something I wrote, but the stories and talking to people are amazing. And it's really an interesting thing.
That's in a way a very selfless thing to do too, because you're wanting to bring it out of other people, maybe who haven't talked about it or shared it. And it shows that there are other ways of doing it than just in the memoir format or medium. So very interesting. I really like to take a look at the book. Thank you for that. Yeah. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about search for you. When did you decide you wanted to search?
The search, Greg, I forgot, are you from New Jersey?
I'm from California, actually, but
California?
I'm in New Hampshire. Yeah.
In around 2017, a law, New Jersey, they passed a law in mid-2010s saying that you could get your original birth certificate. So I actually found out about the law during a summer of 2016, and you have to send in the letter, and your original birth certificate would be mailed to you after January 2017. So just kind of on a whim, I just sent it in. Actually, you know what? Now I think about it, you have to write like a $25 check. I didn't even want my wife to know about it, so I think I went to the post office and got a money order. Like it was just so. I'm like, do I really want to do this? So, but I just did it. And then it came, and I opened it, and it said what it said. One of the things I'll always remember is that there was cover letter that described what you were about to find. And it said, don't, to paraphrase, don't be disappointed. In this era, under Father's Name, it would often say bastard. So if you see the word bastard, don't get upset. It didn't say bastard. There was no name, but Father's Name. But I got a name. And then it was just, Google. One thing I tried to do was be intentional. I kept thinking to myself, listen, you're a puzzle solver. So like the fury in me is trying to find out, just to unsolve the puzzle, all these things.
Yeah.
But I kept stopping myself, because every time you take a step, you say to yourself, my life will never be the same after this.
Yeah.
For good or bad, my life will never be the same. And that's when I actually ultimately got the number, when I actually made the call, decided to make the call, when I had reunification. It's all those things. Before I did them, I sat down and said, this is going to deeply affect my life and people around me. Is this what I want to do? And, deep breath. I'm not a meditator, but, swim a couple miles, clear your brain, make sure you want to do it, and then get in there. And I did it.
Yeah. Because stepping over a threshold or off a cliff, depending on how you feel it about it.
And in some ways, you're probably both.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely fateful in the sense that there's no way back from it. So I was curious, or I will remark that I observed what you said about not wanting your wife to know.
Yeah.
Maybe you just weren't wondering if you really wanted to do it, or I don't know, or whether you felt supported about it, or.
Well, what that was is, like, I sent it in, but I still wasn't sure when I got it if I was prepared to act on it. By the time I got my birth certificate, she was on board. She'd always been supportive. She knew about it. She helped me with Google, and actually Facebook is where we found some stuff.
No.
But at that point, like, I sent it in, and I still wanted to be able to walk away. And she's great, but it wouldn't have been so easy to walk away once I told her I did it.
Yeah. Once you had the information and you said the reunification started, I hope that was I almost want to say, I hope that was a good experience for you, but I know that's a difficult thing to say. Is it? Unfortunately, it's not all the time, or it seems like it will be, and then it's not. Like it's just very complicated. So I hope that's gone more or less the way you hoped it would.
It's gone well. It's gone well. It's funny. I was actually thrown when you just said the way you hoped it would, because, boy, like, you have no idea what to even hope. It's just such an impossibility to imagine. It's gone well. The relationship is good. I've learned a lot of things about myself, gotten a lot of answers, which has been very important. She told me that although this is strictly illegal, she had a friend who had a friend, and they were Italian, and yada, yada, yada. They had connections who knew a guy who knew a guy who knew somebody. So she says the only way she ultimately signed the papers was by getting a guarantee that I would end up in an Italian family, which I did.
Oh, wow.
She says that. She believes it. Maybe it was coincidence. I don't know. But yeah, I was in the hospital for about 10 days while she was deciding whether or not to sign.
Yeah. And you find that now that you've been in the reunion and cultivated some of the relationships, and I agree with you, by the way, there's no roadmap for doing this. I did have expectation or hopes, and everything turned out completely.
I was just joking with.
I understand. There's no way to be prepared for this as an experience there.
I was just joking with Diane, who I mentioned earlier, about this the other day, that we should almost like set up role play for people making the call so they could practice on somebody.
Yeah,
literally,
that's not a bad idea.
You have the phone, you're like, what in the hell do I say? How do I do this? And sometimes the best answer is just to jump, right?
That's what I did. Yeah. In a lot of ways, it was the bravest thing I ever did. But I think I was advised not to do it that way, but I did.
How did you do it?
It was a cold call after getting information from a PI, and who said, don't do anything with this right now. Talk to us first. And I didn't talk to them first. I waited like 3 days, and then I called her out of the blue. She had no idea I was going to call her. And thankfully that conversation went well. Certainly shocked her. And it shocked me that I had courage to do it. But I feel like we'd get the levels of desperation can be such that they drive you to really big, deep things. And also, I think, display a lot of the courage that we really have inside of us to face the things that you talked about as adoptees. I hate to use the word resilient, but resourcefulness inwardly that we develop as we are trying to solve those problems, those puzzles, and figure things out. I think it also can build a really strong strength in us to do things that are almost unimaginably hard for other people to think of.
Yep.
So now that you're in the reunion, and I'm pleased to hear, obviously I'm always pleased to hear it goes well for people, and I wish it went better for more people. Let me ask you about interviewing. So you go on interviews, podcasts, etc. Do you feel like there's a part of you go, I just can't quite bring myself to talk? You don't have to say what specifically things are, but I feel like there are things you would wish your adoptive family didn't hear you say or share?
I think I'm fortunate in that sense, and that there's really not. I don't really think so, because I think it's just been a good experience. I've had support. I think, in retrospect, I think I would like to tell adopting families. I would like an adopting families to maybe read the book or know a little bit maybe about some of the things that was going through my mind that I probably was hiding a lot of my life.
Yeah.
A lot of that feeling of being different that I probably hid. In one sense, I resembled my family, but on another sense, I didn't look like them. And, I always, like, my hair is always a mess. I don't know if you could tell from this, it's a weird angle.
I have it too.
I've had a beard since I'm 18. Like, I hate my face. Like, I can't look at myself in the mirror just because I don't look like everybody else. And that's just always been a thing. I think differently than other people. I'm not saying I'm smarter or dumber. I'm not a dumb guy, but it's just, I notice things in ways, and it's just, I think there's an appreciation that, just because you love me, right? You love me exactly as your child, but I am a little different. And sometimes, I think almost the love blinds that. And I'm not saying how it would be different, but I think there is a feeling that, there were things going on in my mind that I didn't understand. That were probably happening on a deeper level than I understood when I was younger.
Yeah. Felt very similar to that there was lots of love, and there was a lot of not seeing my differences, or maybe not being comfortable with, or being very eager to hurry me past them. So I didn't feel like I felt different, but I needed to feel different. So I wish I'd had more space to feel different, because I was.
Yeah, and there was so much support. And I think, I'll speak about my family. Like, if there was any way they knew they could have supported me in another way, they would have done it. It's just back then people didn't know some of these things.
Did you come into any resources, any books or anything while you were unpacking that were particularly helpful for you?
Anne's book, You Don't Look Adopted.
Yeah.
That one kind of, it was simultaneously impossible to put down and impossible to pick up. Yeah. Because I have a little patio outside where I read, and I kept wanting to put it down. Like I can't keep reading this. It just hits too much home. And I would sit there for 6 seconds and look at it and then pick it back up and then put it back down and put it back. And I read it pretty quick. I really found that to be one of the sparks of, oh my God, I'm not the only person in the world that thinks this, that's having this experience. And that's what kind of brought me into the start of being a part of a community.
Yeah, that was a meaningful book for me too. And I joke with her that I still haven't finished it after almost 3 years. I think she thinks it's pretty funny. I'll read like a paragraph of it and I'll put it down for 3 months or 6 months because so it was it was similar to what you said, but you were able to get over the resistance faster and say, okay, now I got to pick it up again and go some more. I haven't been able to do that, but it sounds like it was affecting you this in a similar way. And I hear from so many people something very similar. It's a whole different way of speaking, and it's so related to a person's body and all the experiences and sensations. Yeah, it was really eye-opening for me too. Well, I certainly have appreciated having the chance to talk with you, Ken, and bring your story to more people. Any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share as we close here?
I think I just really like to thank the other people that have been welcoming. I think one of the things that maybe adoptees, I'll say myself, I don't like to speak for other people, is there was a feeling that I was carrying a burden that nobody else in the world was carrying. And there was a resignation, and that's okay. I can do that. That's okay. But seeing that that's not the case, yeah, I'm carrying a burden. Yeah, there's things I deal with, but there's other people like me, and the similarity we have, and the brotherhood and sisterhood. I would just really like to thank the community for being so welcoming. If there's anybody here who's adopted and not really sure where they fit in the whole space, we want to hear your story, but feel free to be quiet if you want. Just know that we're there for you. And I have never met a person since I've been doing this that wasn't willing to welcome a fellow brother or sister with just open arms and be there whatever way they needed them to be. So just that's what I want to say. Thank you for bringing me into a community that I never knew existed and is so important.
Yeah, I so agree with you and so appreciate those words. And again, thank you very much for your time. And I think we've heard a lot of great things here, and always the perspectives of everybody, even when the experiences are very similar, the different words can be so thought-provoking. So you've given us some things here that I'd never heard expressed that way, which is always the great thing about this. So I want to thank you for that and wish you success with the book and getting more of your voice out there and elevating the voices of other adoptees. And so
Thank you.
Much. Yeah, thanks, Ken. For everybody who's been here, we appreciate your support for Ken and being here, and support also of Fireside Adoptees and our Constellation group as well. So this will, in just a second here, conclude the recorded section of the Zoom call. It's not the end of the call though, so please stay on after you hear the announcement that this is ending. It's not the call ending, just the recorded section. And again, this goes up on the Fireside Adoptees YouTube channel. Thanks to everyone for being here, and we will talk to you again soon.